right. Have my YouTube start without me. So we should be good with the sound now. And let me make sure we are good with the stream as well. I want to share a couple of thoughts about the markets and debt freedom, a little bit from my journey, and also want to share. I'll put this in the comments. Just some things the Lord's been sharing with me about all of it. Um, I was on Instagram earlier today, and somebody sent me a message after I was sharing on my Instagram stories about some of the things I'm going to share with you now. And they said this spoke to me more than you could have known, and I need to make some changes for the better. Thank you and amen. So I thought, well, that might resonate with a few more people. So I want to make sure that I am sharing here as well. So you should see me on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and I'll jump right in because I want to make the most of the time that I have here. You can see we're in a little bit of transition, but nonetheless, still able to stream, still able to make it happen. Somebody else messaged me too. They said they wanted to know if they could see or hear about what I was sharing on my Instagram stories because they don't have Instagram. I thought, well, that's a good opportunity to create a video for it too. So first on the markets, I'm not speaking, this is not financial advice of any kind. It's just what I would say is my perspective. It's a little bit of education. And, my journey in the world of money has been very tumultuous. you could say that. I've had a lot of ups and downs, and it's been something that I've had to really navigate with the Lord. So if you've been on that journey where you're trying to think about, okay, God, what's your perspective on money? This is absolutely going to resonate with you because that's really where I'm coming from when I'm speaking. And I was just sharing today things that I'm personally interested in, specifically with the markets. And I was sharing what I call as the breakdown and the process of a breakdown in a market. So when a market when a market breaks down, what actually happens and how it happens. And so there's really three phases, and there's the stability phase where things are okay, stable. Second phase is things are broken, cracks in the surface. Third phase is there's a collapse, complete collapse. And how all those things happen is a totally different question. But what I was doing was just kind of separating the phases so that people could kind of get a framework or a way of thinking about it. And then I was sharing just kind of where we're at and what I'm seeing. And this is a little bit, it may seem a little bit off topic for some people who've been listening to what I've been sharing over the last 8 years or so. But I think at the end, you'll realize it's not too far off topic because money is such a part of the journey. And so for me, just where I've been on my journey, God has really been helping me get right with money. And as a part of that, and as a part of my background, even working on Wall Street, and all of the education really that I had in that process, whether it was in school or then actually working, and then after the education I've had through what I would just factually say is lots of loss and gains in the process, but loss in having to get to the root of why things weren't working in my relationship with money. I have gained a different perspective on how I see things. So just in conversations with people when they're asking, "Hey, TJ, what's your perspective on what's happening in the world or what's happening in the markets?" People are normally thinking about like stock market, and I'm not one somebody who's like actively in the stock market every day, so I'm not particularly looking at that. Two, I do have an opinion and a perspective, but I think what I want to share more about today is just the big picture and what the Lord's been speaking to me about as it relates to each person's kind of place in the big picture, and hopefully this will give you some insight into how you can be thinking about um, whether it's how you're positioned in your personal life financially, how you're thinking about money, your thoughts and attitudes, and even just maybe just coming to the Lord and being like, this is something I'm not aware of, and I want to be thinking about this a little bit differently. Is there something you want to teach me? So again, not financial advice, just education and some perspective. Now, the first thing is when I'm talking about the breakdown of the market, right? So I'd mentioned there's three phases: the stability phase, the broken phase, and then the collapsing phase. Now, I want to kind of like preface this by saying none of us watching, with maybe a few exceptions, have lived through what was the Great Depression, where there was this 7 year recovery from prices dropping in the stock market specifically. And so a lot of us, especially because of phones and just technology and the kind of innovation that's happened, as well as living through times like 2020 when you saw a quick collapse and then very quick recovery, a lot of us are used to habitually, we're used to things happening quickly. So if there's a collapse, it's a quick rebound. And many people are not in their mind, they're not even thinking about the possibility of like a 7 year cycle, 7 year cycle of when things fall, they stay down. They're thinking, okay, if things fall, get back up quickly, prices come back up quickly. Um, and there maybe are structural things that would help prices come back up quickly. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I think in general, people are not even thinking about, oh, if things collapse here in the markets, not just the stock market, but in other markets, we're not we're not just bouncing back quickly. We could be down for like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years before we're recovering. And a lot of people, I think my generation in particular, is not ready for this. But many generations today, several generations today, are not thinking this way, where it's like this could be a reality given some of the cracks that I'm seeing, and I think other people are seeing. Um, and we haven't really faced that kind of reality before. So I'm hopeful that people, it's not fear. And if you listen to the whole thing, you'll understand what I mean. But I'm hopeful that people are going to kind of get more of a reality check awakening when they're thinking about how to think about the markets and even their personal financial situation. And this is, by the way, coming from a guy who has had was making money, good money in the career, and left that, and then ended up going through a lot of difficulty trying to figure out how to navigate entrepreneurship as I was going through my healing journey. Made some good money doing that, helping people and growing and really navigating that, but then ended up with a whole self-destructive thing, 200K in debt. And um, the Lord brought me out of that and in less than 9 months, and he delivered me from demons. That's a whole nother story. Um, but has really brought a lot of freedom in my relationship with money. And so I'm sharing from some of this perspective. Now, what are some of the cracks in the foundation of the market as a whole right now? I think people need to understand this. So first of all, there's been what's called an inverted yield curve. So the yield curve is essentially the U.S. Treasuries over time, so different maturities, 3 month, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 30 year, and normally they're going up because the longer you wait to The longer you have to lend the money, the more risk premium there is, the more the risk that there is that you're not going to get that money back. And so normally you charge higher interest for longer term loans. But it's actually the reverse right now. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's the reverse. And the point of me saying that is that it's just not how it normally is. The Treasury yield curve is not how it normally is. It's the opposite. And so you have on the shorter end of the curve or shorter maturities or 3 month and 1 year, you have higher rates. And then on the longer end, you have lower rates. And that's called an inversion. And we've had an inversion in the curve for maybe 16 months or so. The reason I'm sharing that is because rates markets often tell you more about what's happening under the hood of the car in the broader market. And so when you're trying to get an understanding of what's happening, just looking at like your favorite stocks is probably not the best indicator. Looking at rates overall is going to give you, and specifically the yield curve is going to give you some kind of what's called like macro indicator of big picture what's happening. And the reason that this inversion is so important is because, or to pay attention to, is because it's such a high predictor of a recession. And we've had this inversion of the rates curve. We've had an inversion for like 16 months, and it's just such a unique. It's such a specific indicator, I would call it. And so for me, when I'm looking at what's going on in the world and in the market, and maybe where there's some cracks showing, I'm thinking rates market. Okay. And when I say rates market, that's just one of many markets, like the stocks and equities market, stock or equities. You can have rates market, you can have commodities market, where you have energy and gold, some metals, some other things. Now you have the real estate market. So rates market is one thing. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, this is very interesting. Now, the second kind of crack that I was seeing as I'm just personally looking around at the markets is I'm just looking at like the everyday person who's paying rent. And I think about 50% of people in the US, I'm just giving a round number here. I don't have this memorized, but some like 50% of people don't own a home. So they're paying rent. And when I was looking at rent inflation, or the prices, the rate of increase in prices over the course of time in the US, you can see that the rate of inflation for rent is at like multi 5-decade highs. In other words, the rate of increase in price for rent, so what you're paying for monthly costs, your largest monthly cost for most people, which is where you live, has increased. That price of rent has increased and is at a rate of inflation that is like not been seen since I'm looking here, and it's like this looks like the late 70s. I mean, you haven't seen these kind of levels of inflation in your rent prices since the late 70s, which is a long time. So that's an indicator for me, because not only do you have this yield curve inverted that's actually telling you, high likelihood of recession, then you also have, well, people's largest expense in where they live, the price of that has increased at such a rate that we haven't seen since the 70s. Like, to me, that's a big, that's pretty interesting. And that's something worth looking at. Then you look at another crack in the foundation. Remember, I talked about the stages of a market breakdown, and there's the stability phase, and then you have broken phase, and then you have a collapse phase. And you look at where the cracks in the brokenness in the market. And you see in the what's called subprime car loan market, I was looking at a chart today, but a lot of Americans are falling behind on these car loans. What that means is 60 days or more. It's the number of people who have fallen behind on their car loan payments, these subprime borrowers, which means they're not like high credit score borrowers. The people who have fallen behind on these payments, these borrowers, has increased. That's increased 3 decades. It hasn't been this high. So you have recession signs showing, you have rent increase at a rate that it hasn't been at since the 70s. You have people who are behind in car loans paying you know, over 60 days late, the number of borrowers who are late and behind in those loan payments, that's at a high that it hasn't been for 3 decades, right? And you're looking at this and you're going, biggest expenses for people are where they live, what they drive, and what they eat, and maybe the gas that they put in that car that they're driving. But it's not looking good as far as, people being able to keep up with these things. So then another, what I would call crack in the foundation, something that's broken, is you add to all of this student loans. Okay. And, this is as of October, I think September interest turned on. It wasn't prior. Now, October, people are paying more in student loans, or they're paying more in their monthly budget, or having to allocate more in their monthly budget because they're having to pay student loans. And so now you have a whole nother layer added to the whole situation, which is people don't just have to pay for where they live, which is increasing. People don't just have to pay for what they drive, and they're falling behind. And people don't just have to pay for the food, which I didn't even mention, but prices are, I think the numbers are not accurate in what they're being told they are. I think we've seen prices in food go up much higher than what we're being told they've gone up. But then you add now that there's all of this student loan debt that has to be repaid. And I'm looking at these numbers and I'm going, of like 1.4 trillion or something like that. Like 100 billion of that is like people who are 62 and older who owe student loan debt. So maybe 6%, 7% of that is people 62 and older with student loan debt, which is insane to me. And then you have a large majority of that sitting in the 25 to 49-year-old. So, like 1.1 of the 1.45 trillion are people in the 25 to 49 category who owe a boatload of money. And those people are trying to raise families. Those people, not all of them own their home outright, for sure, because the people who own their home outright are probably going to be in the 62 plus category most of the time. So now you have just this increased burden on people, and it just keeps increasing. You need to pay attention to these things because it's not like sound the alarm, but it is like you need to pay attention, because the impacts of these cracks that are in the foundation could, if it breaks, could be running across all these different markets that I'm talking about. It's not just the rates market, the stock market, the commodity market where there's energy and metals and other things, where there's food, but it also then could turn into real estate and a whole number of other things. I know there's structural things, low supply in real estate, and so people think that because there's low supply, prices will be buoyed. But you got to really consider, like, if people are falling behind on their car payment, then do they fall behind on any kind of other payments, maybe where they live, and and then what are the consequences of all these things happening? So for me, one of the things, just to kind of move into the debt freedom thing. So I shared about the markets. I shared about how there's this phase of stability, brokenness, and then collapsing. I shared about some of the cracks in the foundation. I believe we're just entering this. We're in the broken phase. I don't think we're in a full-on, rug pull, but I think we're just in this kind of broken phase. And I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to it. They know something's wrong. They might be feeling the pressure. They might be feeling pressure financially, but I don't think people truly understand what's actually happening in the markets, And then I was going to say that as it relates to debt now, because if people thought in 2008, 9, 10, when there was the government bailout, people thought that we were going crazy with the amount of money the U.S. government was issuing or creating in order to bail out banks and really support the economy. We have gone way crazier than that over the last 3 to 5 years in terms of the amount of money printed. And, so there's this issue of debt at the nation level. We have opened the door to debt, and just there's no holding back. It is full on, as much debt as possible. And when you bring that to a personal level, the best way I can describe it is The fact that people die, but the spirit lives on. And I think people are not connecting how much is tied financially to the spiritual reality. And so you can have, people can have a spirit overcome them. And the Bible talks about this. You can have some kind of spirit, it could be an evil spirit, overcome you. Okay, you may pass, but that spirit can pass through and live on, right? And when you think about this whole aspect, this idea of debt, and where it comes from and what people are really um, under the authority of, to be so overcome by debt, it is a spiritual thing. And for me, I've experienced that firsthand in the reality of being consumed by different things. Some you could call it really natural things, like when my dad died and having this kind of grief reaction of fatalism. It's like the idea of fatalism is, what does it matter, right? So get a life insurance policy, make sure your family's good, but the rest of it is all good. YOLO, you don't, that's kind of fatalism for some people. It's like, why invest in the future if I'm going to die now? So that's a really natural response that people can have when they go through grief and loss, and it can affect them financially. But supernaturally, or in the unseen, so natural is nature seen, see of the tree outside, but supernatural is the unseen. And when you have some things that are happening in the supernatural that you're not aware of, that are impacting decision making, whether it's at a country level or at an individual level, and specifically the way I'm talking about it now is with financial decisions and allowing debt, it can be extremely detrimental if you have allowed whatever this spirit is, whether it's a spirit of mammon, idolatry of money, greed, whatever it might be. Normally, one spirit has many, so there's many friends that come with that one spirit. And so when you open the door to them and you allow them in to influence your decisions, it can really lead you down the path that is not, where it's not going to go well with you. It might have short-term benefit, but long-term real negative consequence. And that is often what happens for a lot of people with debt. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of people who are watching or listening have maybe experienced the years where that didn't matter so much. In other words, you either didn't have like a grinding halt to business, you didn't go through a winter season. Maybe the stock market carried you when you had a difficult work transition because the stock market has been on this, 15-year rally or whatever it's been. Maybe, you had somebody, who gave you some advice, you took it, and because the markets are the way they are, you benefited, and you really didn't have to navigate what is like what I mentioned at the beginning, this downward, real 7-year kind of slump, winter season drudgery of like, if you're under the heavy burden of debt and you don't understand principles of money, it's going to be really hard to get out of it, and it could impact you for the next several decades. A lot of people experience that coming out of what, for example, the one example I gave, the Great Depression. And I just don't think our generation is ready for any of that. So I put that in context and then go back to what the Lord spoke to me years ago. And he was telling me about getting out of debt. He was telling me about the importance of it. And for obvious reasons, I knew why he was telling me to get out of debt. Just like the value of not being a slave to the lender. I talk in practical sense. It's like, okay, well, you can take that money and it doesn't go towards, paying down any kind of interest. It goes towards earning interest or earning a return on an investment. And, I also believe, though, one of the reasons he spoke to me about getting out of debt was because some of these cracks we were going to start seeing in the market and what kinds of things you'd be subject to if you're in debt and you don't have assets to cover it. And that's really important. A lot of people got into situations in the last several years in which, that in which they might be, maybe it sounded like a good idea at the time. Let's rush, 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 get into a home, for example. Rush, 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 get into the market. Rush, 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 and do. And I don't think they were fully aware of the reality of what they were getting into, and even the cracks that were already starting to show in the broader economy, and what kind of implication that could have for a person on the individual level. Now, I'm not going to show you a victim card that you need to play and say, yeah, I have no personal choice or power over any of this. Well, you do. I mean, the fact that you live in America, if you're watching and you live in America, is an amazing thing, because we do have so much freedom here and so much opportunity to have some autonomy and opportunity to launch and grow financially. But how you do that really matters, and a lot of people, I think, are lacking some of that wisdom. So for me, what I really wanted to highlight was this piece about the idea of being beholden to something. If you are under a heavy debt burden and can't pay and don't have the assets to pay, okay. And one of the things that the Lord spoke to me about was, is there going to be a need for, if you're that person, government programs? Student loan forgiveness came up. Is there going to be a need for some type of entitlement with strings attached? Now, we haven't necessarily seen that yet, but it's something that I am maybe patiently observing, as we find ourselves in a situation where a lot of people are starting to, if you just kind of think about it more anecdotally, look around, talk with people, pay attention to prices in your everyday life, a lot of people, generally speaking, are realizing the pressure of these sustained increases in prices. And so some of these things that we're maybe seeing at the big picture level, like the inverted yield curve that as I was talking about at the beginning, are now starting to show, maybe these are some signs of things that have happened, that have been happening and are sustaining in, like, the foundation of the world we live in, our everyday life. So, aside from all of that, being debt free doesn't just kind of keep you in a position where you can be wise and free from bondage. There is such a thing as debt prison, right? Physical debt prison, or prison, physical prison from not being able to pay debt. So you want to be debt free from that standpoint. And I know a lot of people even say, like, it's okay if you have a mortgage. And I would say, okay, I understand that, and I'm not fully against that. It's something I've gone back and forth on a lot. It's just also something worth considering, what kind of debt burden you're putting on yourself as you're thinking about some of these bigger cracks in the economy, and even what that could mean to have a debt burden if you cannot pay, if your assets cannot cover you, right? So aside from all that, debt freedom gives you more freedom to pursue opportunities. Is the other side of it. The beautiful part about it is it gives you the freedom to pursue opportunities when prices are moving in your favor, when prices are coming down, okay, as a buyer. And it also gives you the opportunity to be a provider. So debt freedom is really going to give you the opportunity to provide, in the kingdom, as somebody who doesn't just think of self, right? You want to be thinking about, okay, God, like, I know I'm made to glorify you just in my existence and my being. And also part of glorifying you is not just loving myself in a healthy way, but loving others as I love myself. So what does it look like to be free to provide for others in need? And being debt free gives you a lot more flexibility, because you're then not providing at the expense of your own family, breaking your own family. And a lot of people maybe don't have that connection in their mind, because they've been giving out of the expense of themselves for such a long time. And it's been okay, because they've been able to navigate because of the markets being able to sustain. But what happens when they can't? And what happens to your personal situation if you have to make some changes and you haven't navigated what it means to have financial boundaries for yourself. These are things that you need to start considering for yourself. And honestly, I just believe what I'm sharing right now. Today's the 25th of October, 2023. I believe this message is early. I think that people listening right now, who are actually catching what I'm saying and understanding what I'm saying and saying, let me take that to the Lord and see what he says. I think those people, you're catching it early. I think this message, if you wait maybe 6 to 18 months, this message is going to be hitting with a lot of people, because they're going to go, oh, in hindsight, oh, retrospect, like, I hadn't considered that. I didn't notice that. I didn't even know to look for that. That's why I'm trying to communicate something now, because I really believe I'm just a messenger. And it's something that God has positioned me for, which is just having some experience and listening to him. And so I'm trying to communicate it for people so that you understand, maybe you need to come back and watch this video again. Maybe you need to share it with somebody, talk about it. But yeah, I want you to just be thinking about that, not just the markets themselves, but the real value of debt freedom. Okay. And starting to get a little bit more educated about this stuff. And especially those of you who have done well for yourselves, I think you'll probably have your guards down. You're the most susceptible, because you're more, your guards might not be up because you've just done well for yourself and haven't really had to navigate a winter season in your life. For those of us who have had to navigate, like whether it's a financial winter season or other kind of winter seasons where things are super dry, like you know how hard it can be, and how to navigate your way through that if you're not prepared or preparing. And again, it's not a fear thing. Listen to the end. It's more about wisdom. But anyway, I think that in the three phases of a market that breaks down, the stability, the broken, and the collapsing, I think we're kind of entering from stability into this broken. And if you missed the first portion, go back and listen, because I outlined some examples of why I think we're kind of entering into this broken phase of the market where cracks are really starting to show, and how that's going to be impacting people. Now, I talked about debt and debt freedom after that, and I think it's really important. But there's so many other aspects that I really want to help people understand are also important. And number one is just listening to the Lord's voice. And I think people in today's world, if you do not have any understanding of what the Lord's voice is, okay, his word is spirit, and reading his word and the life of the word of God coming through the Holy Spirit will give you wisdom and understanding. But it'll also give you more clarity about the character of God and his voice in your life. And that's so important to have his voice leading, because somebody was showing me a video the other day of AI, and it was like a car on fire, and it looked so real. And the intention of the video was to show how real it looked and how it's actually AI. And my point in sharing that is that we do not know really what is real or not in many ways. Now, that might have always been the case, but now more than ever, with just the speed at which things flow between people, we got to be paying attention to the Lord's wisdom and seeking his wisdom above information. And so even just in me sharing, I'm not sharing, I've given some kind of facts and things that are informative, but I'm also sharing primarily out of the place of hoping people can receive wisdom from what I'm saying, because this is not about, having some kind of like, clear cut case for this is how the market's going to go, and this is why, and all of these things. It's more about take this information into consideration and then apply the Lord's wisdom. Wisdom in this situation where you're starting to see some of these cracks showing in the market is to say, okay, being debt free allows me a lot more freedom than just financial freedom. There's so many other things that can allow me. I haven't been through a 7-year down cycle where the market goes down. We're talking equity market goes down. It takes 7 years to recover, where people are on the street, begging for food and in mass, where entitlement programs go rampant, where there's stipulations attached to the money you might need because you're in debt burden, don't have assets to cover. And that, not that that is going to happen, but that is a reality that people have lived through in the United States of America less than 100 years ago. And people do not understand that that is a real possibility. And especially given kind of the state and some of the cracks that we're seeing and the state of where we are, and where things might be heading, I think it's really important to be preparing. So, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Okay, so you want to prepare for opportunities, you want to get right with money, and you want to give as a discipline. Yeah, exactly. The 7 year down cycle reminds me of the 7 year famine in Egypt during Joseph's time. And that is exactly what I'm referencing and what the Lord has been speaking to me. So it's very interesting that you said that. Um, what was I mentioning? Preparing for opportunities, getting right with money. That is such a thing in the heart. That is such a thing in the heart. Getting right with money it's about your thoughts and attitudes towards money more than it is about money itself. Okay, that's why the Bible says that love of money is the root of all evil. It's not about money, it's about your thoughts and attitudes towards money. So getting right with money looks like getting right with God. And then learning how to do things like giving out of a discipline and as the Lord leads you with the right motivation. Such an important principle. Paying down debt to give yourself more freedom and flexibility to operate as the Lord leads. So helpful. Right? When you have that flexibility and you don't have debt burden, you can do more things freely, just as the Lord's leading you because you're following his voice and listening for him and looking for him. Save, super important principle. It's not just about a rainy day fund. There's so many other reasons to save, and it might be, who knows, for you to provide for others. Okay. But saving is such an important principle and something that honestly, my generation has not been incentivized to do because of the low rate environment we've been in, but now that's changing. So maybe that'll also change. People are incentivized to do it. Maybe that'll also change, but it is a principle. Ask the Lord if there's something he wants to teach you about in his ways with money. Ask him if he wants to show you something different, especially if you've been, in the financial industry. That's where you're also a little bit susceptible because, maybe you're thinking, I know it all. And like, yeah, I've been there, and you can have all the knowledge, but still lack wisdom. So, if you've been maybe in a place where you've done well for yourself, you've kind of done it on your own, you haven't really navigated a winter season, maybe you have some understanding and knowledge in financial markets. One person that messaged me about everything that I'm saying, they are like deep in the financial markets and in a very important decision-making role with that. And, they're telling me this is hitting me on a personal level. This is hitting me and I needed this. And I think that's very telling of that person and their attitude and humility, but it's also telling of like, you can have all this information and be in the weeds of all this stuff that I'm talking about every day and still go, man, I'm still missing the wisdom, the Lord's wisdom. So I want things to go well for you guys. I think the Lord really wants things to go well for you guys. And I don't want people to be caught with their guard down. I have been in my life. I've been caught with my guard down several times. So I hope that is a helpful kind of breakdown for how I've been thinking about things, and even for you guys who are just who are maybe kind of wondering, like, yeah, what's actually happening in the world right now? I mean, there's a lot of voices who could tell you about the markets. I am one of plenty, but I also would say, since I'm not in it on a day-to-day basis, as I once was, there's almost some healthy distance and perspective that gives me some clarity without full understanding of things that I would for sure have in a different role in my life. But there's some clarity. A healthy distance gives you some clarity that I think has allowed the Lord to speak to me about a few things that I was sharing, whether it's even just the three phases, stability, broken, collapsing market, or the value of debt freedom, or even just the things he was sharing with me about being free of debt and the importance of it in the times that we're living in. I think anybody who's listening, if you can understand the freedom from debt piece and how that gives you an opportunity to stay free from other things that you don't want to be involved with or tied to because of the power of agreements, I think that's going to be really healthy. So I will, I already have actually but I will definitely encourage you guys to check out. I'll put this on the bottom here, but I have a 7 principles of money workshop that is, excuse me, that is a give any gift workshop. So it's, literally just, if you want to give $1, you can give $1. It's just operating in the principle of giving and receiving rather than buying and selling. Um, it's just an opportunity for you to go deeper. So I did a 2.5 hour workshop where actually I'm on a whiteboard and I'm going through the 7 principles and sharing testimonies, sharing things that God's done, and going much, 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 much deeper into the personal application of how you can just be thinking about, if you want to get right with money, if you want to be in a place where you're like, okay, I'm really focused on learning God's way of doing this. I've done well for myself, or maybe I came from wealth, or maybe I'm starting to figure it out myself. And I need some help or some guidance or just some perspective from somebody who's been on the journey. I'll make sure that that is in the comments section, even if it's on here, LinkedIn. I don't think it posted, but I'll make sure that's there. So I appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you. And I hope this blesses you. And if you find that it did, please share it with somebody. If you want to talk about it, if you want to send me a message with a couple thoughts that you might have had, or how this brought up some other things for you, I'd love to hear it. So you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook, LinkedIn, or even on YouTube. You can just leave a comment. Appreciate